How can I convince my parents to stop doing keto? This is their fourth time doing it because it's the only diet that works for them.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to include those air quotes that they put in quotes. It's the only diet that works for them. So I'm assuming the person that asked this, you probably already know that it doesn't really work for them because you put that in quotes, because if it worked for them, they wouldn't be doing it for their fourth time. They would just still be doing it. I think the thing is, nutrition's very emotionally charged. It's like religion and politics now, where people over-identify with how they eat. You see literally people put it in their Instagram bio if they're like keto or vegan, whatever. You see it a lot on Twitter too.
Carnivore.
Yeah. And here's the thing. If they like it, then I wouldn't say anything. But if they really liked it, they probably wouldn't have to do it and then get off it, and then do it and get off it. And they're at a place where they're convinced that this is all that works for them. So they've probably tried tracking their calories. But when you don't do it with a coach, and the first time you're doing it is just on your own, it's really fucking hard. And they probably do what most people do. You get a calorie calculator on the internet. And like, I have an article that tells you, how to calculate your calories, but it's still a crapshoot. It's a guess. Any of those estimates are a guess. And they probably did that, and they ate in what they thought was a calorie deficit, and it wasn't actually a calorie deficit. On top of that, they're probably not very accurate with how they're tracking, and they're probably not tracking certain foods they eat. Like most people, we're notorious for overeating when we're tracking. People who try to lose weight generally underestimate how much you're eating. People who are trying to gain weight tend to overestimate how much they're actually eating. So,
I mean, I've noticed this personally.
Absolutely.
Like before I started my cut, like I started the cut, but then I seriously started the cut. I would track my calories during the day, but I wouldn't track the Oreos that I ate.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of people don't track those sneaky calories or the late night calories or whatever the case. So they probably think that keto is the only diet that works for them, but they probably haven't really tried other diets as strictly as they have with keto, because with tracking calories and people know that, oh, nothing's off limits, it's good to have that flexibility, but then they lack structure. And what these other, fad diets do is they provide you with structure. So they know, okay, I can't have carbs. It's black and white, right? With tracking calories, it's not black and white. And it's harder. Moderation is hard. But when you can slowly, get moderation into your diet, it's unbelievably rewarding, right? You can actually enjoy going out with friends, enjoying a beer here and there, having a drink. And those things are a lot harder when you're on a very strict diet. But it can be done. It just takes building long-term habits that's difficult, man. Like when I'm with clients, like we're working on one habit for like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And once we get that one habit and it's set, we've done a really good job for 2 weeks, we might add in another.
Right.
We might wait another 2 weeks. It really depends.
But that's why I see the benefit in running these diets is because it gives you that structure, mm-hmm. and you can see what works for you and what doesn't. Yep. And then when you quote unquote go off of it, you can take some of the structure that worked for you and then eliminate what didn't work for you and find something else that will work.
And I think having those conversations with them is what can be helpful. Not telling them, hey, you need to stop doing keto. This isn't good, blah, blah, blah. You can tell them like, hey, keto isn't bad. It's worked well for you guys. That's good. I'm glad that it's worked for you and you've done it. But maybe what you could do is run a slightly different version of keto, right? So you see, like you said, what works for you. But you could explain that one of the potential problems with a ketogenic diet is you're either on it or you're off it. It's black and white, where you could encourage them to find a diet that can be more like a thermostat rather than a light switch, and tell them that, hey, you can be, 60% on point or 70 or 80%. You don't have to be 100 or 0. Because most people, when they get off keto, they just go on a bender, mm-hmm. because they've been so restricted for so long that all of a sudden they're eating everything in sight, or they're eating whatever they want. They're going to, shitty restaurants. They get a donut on their way to work, whatever the case. And I think when you kind of walk them through that logic that it could be, just dial it back a little bit rather than going way off the rails. And then when you're getting more on point, then cool, you can turn that thermostat up and really dial your nutrition in. But the ultimate thing that you can do is lead by example. Because if your parents can see you achieving your body composition goals while including the foods you love, and they'd be like, hey, how'd you go out over the weekend and maintain your progress? How'd you not go way off? And you can explain it to them. But until they see you doing it, they're not going to believe that it works. And even then, they're still going to be resistant towards it, because most people that do keto have this suspicion that, oh, well, I tried tracking calories and it didn't work, so I'm insulin resistant.
Yeah, well,
and they probably aren't.
And I see that more on the flip side of like parents trying to get their kids to eat healthier, where that's where the leading by example comes into play. Because especially, it depends who's getting the groceries. Like if you're complaining about the kinds of foods that you have in the house or don't have, but you're not the one going and getting groceries, like either one, take the initiative to get the groceries, or two, if you're a parent and you're trying to get your kid to eat healthier, lead by example. If you don't want them eating Cheetos, don't have Cheetos in the house. Especially don't eat Cheetos in front of them. Because if you're telling them they can't eat Cheetos, but after dinner you're snacking on a box or a bag of Cheetos, bag.
Bag, box.
I don't think they come in boxes.
No, I don't think they do actually.
Cheez-Its come in boxes.
Cheez-Its do. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. But if your kid sees you doing that, but all of a sudden you're telling them they can't do that, that's going to lead to them like, well, fuck, if they're doing it, they're probably not going to say fuck.
Yeah.
But if they're doing it, then I'm going to do it too. And leading by example has so much power behind it than just telling someone to do something. Because if you are the one that's doing it as well, people are much more likely to follow that.
Yeah. And I think whenever you're looking at persuasion and trying to persuade someone to do something, you have to look at like what makes something persuasive, right? So if you come to them right out the gate to have this conversation and say keto sucks because XYZ and blah, 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 you have to understand they think keto is the best diet because that's the only one that's helped them see progress, right? So you have to enter the conversation through their door and say something along the lines of like, hey, keto is actually a very valid nutrition approach. There actually, can be tons of benefits to it. And I'm glad that it's worked really well for you guys. But because you've been on and off for a while, maybe there's a different approach that works. So you have to kind of enter, when I say enter through their door, you have to enter that conversation and find some common ground. Think about any time you've had a disagreement with someone. If they come right out the gate saying, you're wrong because XYZ, it doesn't matter the facts that they show you. They could show you research. They could show you whatever. You don't care what they have to say now because they're an asshole, right? And so you have to enter the conversation through their door and understanding you have to meet them where they're currently at. And then you have to lay out some, practical steps and probably some research and some facts to show them that there are other ways to do it as well that don't have to be as restrictive. So if your parents, when they're on keto, if they don't like it and they're complaining about it and all this stuff, you tell them how effective it can be, but also that this is good news that there's other ways of doing it. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying there are also other ways to do it. Doesn't make it better or worse. They're just different. And it might be better for you, but worse for me. But you need to find what's best for you. And you can point them in the direction of some really good resources for nutrition, whether you bring them to our podcast or a different fitness podcast, send them articles or research or, any fitness content creator online that, gives really high quality information. You point them in those directions and really remind them what you're doing isn't wrong, but there are other ways that you could do it that might be more enjoyable for you. Because if it was really enjoyable for you to be on this diet, you wouldn't be on and off it all the time. You could kind of dial it back and dial it in. But ultimately, it's going to come down to leading by example.